The King of Coke, the complete story of Pablo Escobar. Episode 1, The Boy from Rio Negro, the origins of the future King of Cocaine, 1949 to 1968. In December 1993, the world's most wanted man lay dead on a rooftop in Medellin, shot 3 times. He had controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade and defied entire governments. But how did a child born into poverty in a small Colombian town get there? This is the story of Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, and all began 44 years earlier. On December 1st, 1949, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born in Rio Negro, Antioquia. His father, Abel de Jesus Dario Escobar Echeverri, is a humble peasant who works as a night watchman. His mother, Hermilda de los Dolores Gaviria Barrio, is a rural schoolteacher with strong religious convictions. The family lives in a modest wattle-in daub house, where money is scarce but maternal love is never lacking. Hermilda hugs her newborn son, unaware that the baby will become the most powerful criminal in the history of Latin America. When Pablo was 3 years old, the Escobar Gaviria family moved to Medellin, specifically to the El Tablazo neighborhood. The Antioquia capital of the 1950s was a city in transformation. Industrialization attracted thousands of farmers seeking opportunities, but also created pockets of poverty around the city. Lil Pablo grew up observing this reality. He saw how some neighbors managed to rise in society, while others remained trapped in poverty. From an early age, his sharp mind began to understand that money is power, and that without it, one is invisible. From childhood, Pablo Escobar displayed a magnetic personality and natural leadership. In the neighborhood, he organized the games, suggested the pranks, and led the other children. But he also displayed disturbing signs. When someone bothered or humiliated him, his revenge was disproportionate. By the age of 8, he had already developed his own moral code. He fiercely protected his family, especially his mother, but didn't hesitate to lie or deceive if necessary. His neighbors remembered him as a charming but unpredictable child. In 1957, Pablo entered the San Jose to Las Vegas school, where his mother worked as a teacher. Hermilda placed enormous hopes in her son's education, believing that knowledge would be his passport to a better life. Pablo is intelligent and a quick learner, but from the beginning, he clashes with authority figures. He refuses to accept being treated as inferior by his middle-class classmates and develops an obsession with proving he can surpass them in every way. His grades are uneven. He excels in the subjects that interest him, but completely abandons those he considers useless. During his early teenage years, Pablo watches with fascination the smugglers operating in Medellin. These men, who traffic cigarettes, liquor, and imported goods, dress well, drive luxury cars, and are respected in the neighborhood. For young Pablo, they represent everything he wants to be: powerful, rich, and independent. He begins to ask them questions, study their methods, and understand how their businesses work. His mother notices that her son has begun to change, but she doesn't yet understand where that transformation is heading. At 16, Pablo Escobar started his first business, selling candy and cigarettes to his schoolmates. But he's no ordinary salesman. He studies each customer's taste, offers credit to those who need it, and gradually raises his prices until he becomes indispensable. He also begins selling homework and exams he's written to less capable students. His earnings are modest, but the real learning process lies elsewhere. He's discovering how to create dependency, how to manage risk, and how to turn needs into business opportunities. In 1965, Pablo witnesses the police violently raid the home of a neighbor suspected of smuggling. He sees the officers humiliate the man in front of his family, confiscate his belongings, and drag him away in handcuffs while his children cry. That night, Pablo can't sleep. He has realized something fundamental. In Colombia, the law protects the powerful and crushes the weak. He decides he will never be one of the crushed. He begins to fantasize about having so much power that not even the police dare touch him. In 1966, Pablo Escobar makes a decision that will devastate his mother. He drops out of high school just as he is about to graduate. Hermilda begs, screams, and cries, but Pablo is adamant. He explains that formal education won't get him where he wants to go, that he needs to learn on the street in real life. His first jobs are varied and fleeting. He sells lottery tickets, works in a brick factory, runs errands for merchants. But in each job, Pablo doesn't just follow orders. He studies the business, identifies opportunity for improvement, and proposes changes. His bosses notice his intelligence, but also his tendency to question everything. At 18, Pablo meets Alvaro Prieto, a local petty criminal who specializes in car theft. Prieto sees potential in young Escobar. He's intelligent, brave, and hungry for advancement. He suggests he join his gang, starting with menial jobs, acting as a lookout during robberies, helping transport stolen vehicles, and finding buyers. Pablo accepts, not because he needs the money, but because he senses this is a path to something much bigger. His mother begins to notice worrying changes. Pablo comes home late. He has money he can't explain, and there's a new hardness in his eyes. In March 1968, Pablo Escobar is arrested for the first time. The police find him with a stolen car, and although he insists he was just out for a ride with a friend, he is taken to jail. He spends 3 months in detention, a time he uses to make 2 crucial discoveries. First, that the Colombian judicial system is deeply corrupt and that almost everything can be bought. Second, that in prison he meets more experienced criminals who are willing to teach him. When he is released, thanks to the intervention of a lawyer his mother obtained by pawning her jewelry, Pablo is no longer the same. He has seen the dark side of society and has decided to become part of it. Upon leaving prison, Pablo Escobar walks slowly through the streets of Medellin. He is 19 years old and has just spent the 3 most formative months of his life. An ambitious plan is brewing in his mind. He won't settle for stealing cars or committing petty crimes. He has heard of something new, something arriving in Colombia from the United States, something that promises unimaginable profits. It's called cocaine, and very few in 1968 understand the power this white substance is about to unleash. Pablo smiles as he walks. He doesn't know it yet, but he is about to become the architect of the most powerful criminal empire in history. Episode 2, First Steps in the Underworld. The Rise of a Common Criminal, 1968 to 1975. By 1975, Pablo Escobar was no longer a simple car thief. He controlled a kidnapping network that terrorized wealthy families in Medellin, had amassed a considerable fortune, and had earned the respect of the city's most dangerous criminals. But he hadn't yet touched cocaine. How did this 26-year-old manage to build a criminal empire from scratch? The answer lies in 7 years of violence, cunning, and an ambition that knew no bounds. When Pablo is released from prison in June 1968, his mother, Hermilda, waits for him at the door with tears in her eyes. During his 3 months in prison, she has prayed every day for her son to abandon his wicked ways. But Pablo has changed. He walks differently, talks differently, looks differently. In prison, he has met professional thieves, experienced con artists, and veteran hitmen. He has learned that crime can be an exact science if practiced with discipline and intelligence. He tells his mother that everything will be fine, that it was just a misunderstanding, but in his head, he is already planning his next move. Pablo joins his cousin Gustavo Gaviria, his brother Roberto, and some neighborhood friends to form what will become known as the Marlboro Gang. Their specialty, stealing luxury cars and selling them in other cities or stripping them down for parts. But Pablo introduces innovations. He studies his victims' schedules, investigates their routines, and plans each robbery like a military operation. Within 6 months, his gang becomes the most efficient in Medellin. The profits are considerable, but Pablo is already thinking bigger. In 1970, Pablo Escobar commits his first kidnapping. The victim is Diego Echevarria, a prosperous industrialist from Medellin. Pablo has studied Echevarria for weeks. He knows his schedule, his routes, his vulnerabilities. The kidnapping is executed with military precision, swift, clean, without witnesses. Echevarria is kept on a farm on the outskirts of Medellin, while Pablo negotiates a ransom of $100,000. When he receives the money, Pablo discovers something that will change his life. Kidnapping a wealthy person is much more profitable than stealing 100 cars. Between 1970 and 1974, Pablo perfected his kidnapping scheme. He developed a scientific method. He researched potential victims for months, studied their finances, assessed their ability to pay, and calculated the exact ransom amount that would maximize profits without provoking resistance. His operations were so professional that some kidnapped victims later acknowledged having been treated with respect during their captivity. Pablo understood that a well-treated kidnapper is one who doesn't seek revenge. Pablo develops his own criminal code of honor. Never kidnap children, never touch women inappropriately, never kill unless absolutely necessary. He also establishes rules for his organization. Members of his gang must be loyal, discreet, and professional. Anyone who breaks the rules faces severe consequences. This code is born not of moral principles, but practical intelligence. Pablo understands that uncontrolled violence attracts unwanted attention and creates unnecessary enemies. During one of his kidnappings, Pablo has a revelatory encounter. He has kidnapped the son of a local politician, and when he goes to negotiate the ransom, he meets a man who speaks to him fearlessly, who doesn't beg or grovel. The politician tells him, "Guys, you're thinking small. With that intelligence and organization, you could do much bigger things." That conversation plants a seed in Pablo's mind. Perhaps the kidnapping is just a first step towards something much more powerful. By 1973, Pablo Escobar had amassed more money than he ever imagined. He owned several farms, a fleet of cars, and a luxurious home in Medellin. But more important than money was a reputation he had built. In Medellin's underworld, the name Pablo Escobar commanded respect and fear. Petty criminals sought to work for him, businessmen willingly paid him protection money, and even some police officers accepted his bribes. He had created a small empire, but he had yet to find his true calling. On March 26, 1976, Pablo Escobar marries Maria Victoria Henao, a 15-year-old girl from a respectable family. The marriage scandalizes Medellin society. She is a minor, and he is a known criminal. But Pablo is genuinely in love, and Maria Victoria represents for him the possibility of a normal life, a family, and a respectable reputation. The ceremony is modest but elegant, and Pablo vows that his wife will never suffer the hardships he endured as a child. In mid-1974, Pablo heard detailed stories about cocaine trafficking for the first time. An acquaintance who worked with smugglers told him about the enormous profits generated by transporting this white substance from Colombia to the United States. The figures were staggering. A kilo of cocaine that costs $1,000 in Colombia sells for $20,000 in Miami. Pablo did the math in his head. He could earn more with just one load of cocaine than with all his kidnappings combined. In December 1975, Pablo Escobar makes the most important decision of his life. After months of research and planning, he decides to gradually abandon kidnapping and enter the cocaine business. It won't be easy. He needs contacts, routes, infrastructure, and above all, he needs to understand a completely different business. But Pablo trusts his intelligence and his ability to adapt. That night, as he looks out at Medellin from his window, he can't imagine that he has just taken the first step toward becoming the most powerful criminal in the world. Pablo Escobar stands at the Medellin airport, watching a small plane prepare for takeoff for Miami. The plane is carrying 15 kilos of pure cocaine, the first shipment he has personally organized. It's January 1976. He is 26 years old, and he is about to discover that cocaine is not just a drug. It is a key to unimaginable power. In the coming years, this white substance will make him the richest, most feared, and most wanted man in Colombia, but will also unleash a violence that will plunge his country into an all-out war. Episode 3, The White Powder. The discovery of cocaine, 1975 to 1979. In 1979, Pablo Escobar controlled 60% of the cocaine trade between Colombia and the United States. His weekly profits exceeded $10 million. He owned a fleet of private planes, and he had bought off half the Medellin government. But 4 years earlier, he didn't even know how cocaine was processed. How did this former kidnapper become the king of an industry he himself helped create? The answer lies in 4 years of dizzying learning, calculated violence, and the construction of the most sophisticated criminal empire in history. In January 1976, Pablo Escobar meets Alfredo Gomez, a pilot who transports cocaine from Colombia to the United States. Gomez explains the basics of the business. Coca paste is processed in clandestine laboratories, converted into pure cocaine, and then flown to Miami, where local dealers sell it on the streets. The profits are astronomical, but the risks are also enormous. Pablo listens to every word with the concentration of an exemplary student. He has found his destiny. For his first trafficking operation, Pablo decides to start small. 15 kilos of cocaine transported in a Cessna plane piloted by Gomez. Pablo invests all his savings in the operation. He buys the drugs, pays the pilot, and bribes airport officials. For 3 days, he can't sleep or eat. He knows that if the operation fails, he'll lose everything. When Gomez calls from Miami to confirm that the shipment arrived safely, Pablo experiences a sense of power he's never known before. In 1 week, he's earned more money than in all his years as a kidnapper. Pablo isn't content with being a simple courier. Throughout 1976, he obsessively studied every aspect of the cocaine business. He traveled to the Atlantic coast to meet the processors who turned coca paste into pure cocaine. He learned about chemistry, transportation routes, and consumer markets. He read American magazines to understand cocaine consumption habits in cities like New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. Every piece of information he acquired became a competitive advantage. To expand his operations, Pablo needs to build a network of contacts in 3 countries: Colombia, where the drug is produced, the United States, where it is consumed, and several transit countries. In Colombia, he recruits farmers who grow coca, chemists who process the drug, and pilots who transport it. In the United States, he establishes alliances with local distributors, primarily Cuban exiles who control the Miami market. In the Caribbean islands, he bribes officials who turn a blind eye when his planes need to refuel. Pablo revolutionizes cocaine trafficking by introducing technological innovations. He develops secret compartments in cars that are impossible to detect during routine inspections. He creates mobile laboratories that can be dismantled and transported within hours if police presence is detected. He establishes radio communication systems that use complicated codes. Each innovation gives him an advantage over the competition and the authorities. In August 1977, one of Pablo's operations is detected by the National Police. A shipment of 100 kilos of cocaine is confiscated at the Bogota airport, and 3 of his men are arrested. For the first time, Pablo experiences a panic of being persecuted. But instead of fleeing or abandoning the business, he decides to face the problem in a calculated manner. He hires the best lawyers, bribes key officials, and secures the release of his men without exposing the organization. Experience teaches him that the law can also be bought. On February 24th, 1977, Juan Pablo Escobar, the first son of Pablo and Maria Victoria, was born. For Pablo, fatherhood represents a fundamental change. He now has a family to protect and a legacy to build. He vows that his son will have all the opportunities he didn't have, that he will study at the best universities, that he will never know poverty. That night, looking down at his newborn son, Pablo makes a decision. He will build an empire so powerful that his family will be protected forever. At the end of 1977, Pablo finds himself in the middle of a price war with other Colombian traffickers. Some competitors try to displace him by offering cheaper cocaine to American distributors. Pablo responds with a brilliant strategy. Instead of lowering his prices, he improves the quality of his product. He establishes higher purity standards, guarantees on-time deliveries, and offers excellent customer service. His cocaine becomes a premium brand on the market, allowing him to maintain high prices while increasing his market share. Pablo understands that to grow, he needs political and police protection. He begins systematically bribing officials at all levels: rank-and-file police officers, civil servants, prosecutors, judges, and local politicians. He develops a sophisticated system of monthly payments that guarantee his protection. It's not just corruption. Pablo offers plata o plomo, silver or lead, take my money or face the consequences. Most choose money. By 1978, Pablo had hundreds of public officials on his payroll. By 1979, Pablo Escobar is no longer a simple drug trafficker. He is the CEO of a multinational criminal enterprise. His operations span 5 countries, employ thousands of people, and manage budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. He has built private airstrips, state-of-the-art laboratories, and distribution networks that reach as far away as Europe. But Pablo knows he is building on sand. With each passing day, his empire grows larger, but also more fragile. It's December 1979, and Pablo Escobar is celebrating his 30th birthday at a luxurious estate surrounded by his family and closest associates. In 4 years, he has gone from being a local kidnapper to becoming the most powerful cocaine trafficker in the world. His annual income exceeds $500 million. But that night, while toasting with French champagne, Pablo receives news that will change everything. The U.S. government has just created the DA, an agency specialized in combating drug trafficking. The war is about to begin, and Pablo Escobar will become public enemy number 1 in 2 nations. Episode 4. The King Without a Crown. The cocaine empire at its peak, 1979 to 1984. In 1984, Pablo Escobar was the 7th richest man in the world, according to Forbes magazine. He controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade, generated a daily income of $25 million, and had so much money that he spent $10,000 a week just on rubber bands to wrap bills. But 5 years earlier, he still faced competition from other Colombian cartels. How did this trafficker from Medellin manage to eliminate all his rivals and become the undisputed cocaine emperor? The story of those 5 years is marked by unprecedented violence and a business acumen that forever revolutionized organized crime. In January 1980, Pablo Escobar called a secret meeting at a farm on the outskirts of Medellin. The region's most powerful traffickers attended: Carlos Letter, the Ochoa brothers, Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, and Gustavo Gaviria. Pablo proposed something revolutionary. Instead of competing among themselves, they should join forces to form an organization that would control all trafficking from Colombia to the United States. The idea was simple but brilliant. Divide territories, standardize prices, share routes, and unitedly confront any external threat. Thus was born the Medellin cartel, the most powerful criminal organization in history. During 1981, Pablo launched a systematic campaign to eliminate traffickers who refused to join the cartel. His methods were brutal but effective. He offered each competitor the opportunity to join his organization on generous terms. Those who accepted prospered. Those who refused disappeared. In less than a year, more than 50 independent traffickers had been killed or fled the country. The message was clear. In the cocaine business, there was only room for one organization. Pablo revolutionized cocaine transportation by developing what they internally called the Route of 1,000 Planes. It actually consists of 300 aircraft of varying sizes, from small Cessnas to large Boeing cargo planes. Each plane makes multiple trips per week, transporting between 200 and 1,000 kilos of cocaine per flight. The pilots are war veterans hired at salaries of $50,000 a month. The routes change constantly to avoid detection. By 1982, this air fleet transported more cocaine than all other criminal organizations in the world combined. In 1982, Pablo purchased Hacienda Napoles, a 3,000-hectare estate that became a symbol of his power. The estate included a zoo with exotic animals brought from Africa, private landing strips, artificial lakes, and a mansion that rivaled royal palaces. Pablo invested over $50 million in turning Napoles into his personal kingdom. The estate was not just a display of wealth. It was a fortress from which he coordinated operations spanning 3 continents. By 1983, Pablo faced a problem no one had ever had before. He had so much money he didn't know what to do with it. His daily income exceeded $20 million, but spending it became impossible without attracting attention. He developed creative methods, buying thousands of properties under false names, investing in legitimate businesses, and burying millions of dollars in rural estates. It is estimated that during this time, Pablo lost 10% of his fortune simply because the bills deteriorated due to humidity or were eaten by rats. Pablo understands that money without political power is vulnerable. In 1982, he decides to run for Congress as a substitute for the Liberal Party. His campaign is based on social aid for the poor. He builds entire neighborhoods for homeless families, donates ambulances to hospitals, and funds youth soccer teams. The residents of Medellin adore him. For them, Pablo Escobar is the benefactor the state never was. He easily wins the election and is sworn in as an alternate congressman. For the first time in his life, Pablo has parliamentary immunity and access to the highest circles of power. When Pablo arrives in Congress, he discovers a project to approve an extradition treaty with the United States. The treaty would allow Colombian drug traffickers to be tried in American courts, where the penalties are harsher and corruption more difficult. For Pablo, extradition is a death sentence. He launches a fierce campaign to block the treaty, bribing congressmen, financing demonstrations, and publishing articles in newspapers. But he also prepares a more sinister plan B, a list of officials who must be killed if the treaty is approved. Pablo's political career falters when Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla publicly accuses him of being a drug trafficker. Lara presents evidence of Pablo's criminal dealings in Congress and demands his expulsion. The national press begins to investigate Pablo's fortune, uncovering properties and businesses that cannot be justified with legal income. Pablo is forced to resign his parliamentary seat in January 1984. He has lost his immunity, but has learned a crucial lesson. Those who attack him must pay the consequences. On April 30th, 1984, hitmen hired by Pablo Escobar assassinated Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla in the streets of Bogotá. The assassination shocked Colombia. For the first time, drug trafficking had killed such a high-ranking official. Pablo did not hide his responsibility. On the contrary, his message was clear to any official who dared confront him. The government declared a state of siege and promised an all-out war against drug traffickers. Pablo had crossed a line from which there was no return. After Lara Bonilla's murder, Pablo realizes that Colombia has become dangerous for him. He goes into exile in Panama, where he lived protected by General Manuel Noriega in exchange for millions of dollars in bribes. For 6 months, Pablo enjoys a luxurious life. Parties on yachts, private casinos, beautiful women. But from Panama, he also coordinates the expansion of his empire, establishing new routes to Europe, developing more sophisticated money laundering methods, and preparing for war against the Colombian government. Exile is not a defeat. It is a strategic pause. In December 1984, Pablo Escobar secretly returns to Colombia after 6 months of exile. He has lost his parliamentary immunity, is being pursued by 2 governments, and has a $5 million bounty on his head. But he also controls 80% of the global cocaine trade, has a personal fortune estimated at $3 billion, and commands a private army of thousands of hitmen. He is about to face the most brutal war of his life, but he is also at the height of his power. The coming years will determine whether Pablo Escobar becomes the most powerful criminal emperor in history, or whether his empire collapses under the weight of its own violence. Episode 5. Total War. The confrontation with the state, 1984 to 1989. Between 1985 and 1989, Pablo Escobar waged an all-out war against the Colombian state that left more than 3,000 dead. He assassinated a presidential candidate, blew up a commercial airliner with 107 passengers, and put a price on the heads of police officers and officials. During those 5 years, Colombia experienced the most violent period in its modern history, and Pablo Escobar became public enemy number 1 in the world. But how did he reach this point of no return? What led him to declare war on an entire nation? The answer lies in a spiral of violence that no one could stop. In January 1985, Pablo Escobar clandestinely returns to Colombia after his exile in Panama. The country he finds is different. There are military checkpoints on the highways. His properties have been confiscated. His associates are dead or on the run, and an elite police force has been created specifically to capture him. Pablo realizes he can no longer operate as before. He must become an urban guerrilla. He establishes his headquarters in the communes of Medellin, where he has the unconditional support of thousands of young people willing to die for him. Pablo creates a paramilitary organization called the Extraditables, whose motto is, "We prefer a grave in Colombia to a prison in the United States." The group unites the country's most wanted drug traffickers under a common cause, to avoid extradition at all costs. The Extraditables declare war on the Colombian state and announce that they will assassinate any official who supports the extradition treaty. Their first act is to distribute leaflets in Bogotá threatening to kill Supreme Court justices. On November 6, 1985, 19 guerrillas stormed the Palace of Justice in Bogotá. Although Pablo was not officially involved, many believe he financed the operation to destroy the extradition files being processed by the Supreme Court. The operation ended in tragedy. More than 100 people died, including 11 justices. The extradition files were indeed destroyed, but the cost in human lives was devastating. Pablo has demonstrated his ability to attack the highest symbols of state power. Pablo declares open war on the national police, offering rewards for each officer killed. $2,000 for a private, $10,000 for an officer, $50,000 for a commander. The response is immediate. Police officers begin to be murdered daily on the streets of Medellin, Bogota, and Cali. In 6 months, more than 500 officers have been executed. The police respond with brutal operations in working-class neighborhoods, which generates even more violence. Colombia becomes a battlefield. On August 18, 1989, Pablo's hitmen assassinated Luis Carlos Galán, presidential candidate of the Liberal Party and a staunch opponent of drug trafficking. Galán was executed during a political rally in Socha in front of thousands of people. The assassination shocked the country. Galán was considered the next president and the leader of the fight against drug trafficking. His death marked a turning point. The government realized it must confront Pablo with the same violence he used. Following Galán's assassination, President Virgilio Barco declared a state of siege and authorized the immediate extradition of drug traffickers. An elite force of 2,000 police officers specifically trained to combat Pablo Escobar was created. The United States offered military support, including reconnaissance aircraft, communications equipment, and specialized advisors. For the first time since independence, Colombia faces an internal war that threatens the stability of the state. On November 27, 1989, Pablo ordered a bomb to be placed on Avianca Flight 203, en route from Bogota to Cali. The explosion destroyed the Boeing 727 5 minutes into the flight, killing 107 passengers and 5 crew members. The objective was to assassinate Cesar Gaviria, a presidential candidate who was supposedly traveling on the plane, but Gaviria had canceled his flight at the last minute. The massacre of innocent civilians marks the lowest point in Pablo's criminal career. The attack on Flight 203 sparked an unprecedented international response. The United States added Pablo Escobar to its list of international terrorists and offered $10 million for his capture. France, Spain, and the United Kingdom collaborated with intelligence to track his movements. Interpol coordinated operations in 15 countries simultaneously. Pablo is no longer just a Colombian problem. He has become a global threat that must be neutralized. By the end of 1989, Pablo Escobar is the most wanted man in the world, but also the loneliest. His former associates are dead or have betrayed him. His family lives in hiding in terror, unable to trust anyone. He spends his nights changing hiding places, sleeping in makeshift caches, communicating only by radio with his lieutenants. The empire he spent 15 years building is crumbling under the weight of the violence he himself unleashed. At the end of 1989, Pablo takes stock of his war against the state. He has murdered more than 3,000 people, including 500 police officers, 50 judges, 30 journalists, and dozens of politicians. He has spent more than $200 million on bribes and violent operations. His criminal organization is fragmented, his cocaine routes have been dismantled, and a large part of his fortune has been confiscated. The war he began to avoid extradition has spiraled into a spiral of violence that threatens to destroy everything Pablo built. It's December 1989, and Pablo Escobar is celebrating Christmas Eve in a damp, cold cove in the mountains of Antioquia. He's accompanied only by 2 loyal bodyguards, while his family hides in another country, and his enemies search for him in every corner of Colombia. 5 years ago, he was a respected congressman and the richest man in the country. Now, he's a fugitive unable to emerge into the light of day. That night, Pablo realizes he must change his strategy. Violence has brought him to the brink of collapse. It's time to attempt negotiation, even if it means admitting his first defeat. Episode 6, The Golden Prison, Negotiation and Self-Deception, 1989 to 1992. On June 19, 1991, Pablo Escobar voluntarily walked to prison to serve a sentence he himself had negotiated. The prison was called La Catedral, but it was more of a luxury resort than a penitentiary. It had a jacuzzi, a soccer field, a bar, a casino, and Pablo could receive intimate visits whenever he wanted. For 13 months, the world's most wanted criminal lived like a king in his gilded prison. But how did Pablo convince the Colombian government to build him a prison tailored to his needs? And why did he decide to surrender just when he seemed to be winning the war? The answer lies in a negotiation that forever changed the rules of the game between crime and the state. In January 1990, Pablo Escobar sent a letter to President Cesar Gaviria proposing a surrender in exchange for specific guarantees. No extradition, a special prison where his safety could be guaranteed, and the right to be tried by Colombian courts. The proposal surprised the government. After years of total war, the country's most wanted criminal was willing to negotiate. Gaviria understood that capturing Pablo by force could take decades and cost thousands more lives. Negotiation seemed the only rational course of action. For 6 months, government representatives and Pablo's lawyers secretly negotiated the terms of surrender. Pablo demands extraordinary conditions. The prison must be located in territory of his choice. He can design the facilities. The guards will be selected by him, and he will be allowed unrestricted visits. In return, he promises to dismantle his criminal organization, reveal drug trafficking routes, and cooperate with justice. The government accepts most of the conditions, desperate to end the violence that is draining the country. Pablo chooses a mountain in Envigado, near Medellin, to build his private prison. The project cost $3 million and took 8 months to complete. The cathedral includes luxurious bedrooms, offices, a conference room, a gym, a soccer field, a fully equipped bar, a gourmet kitchen, and a jacuzzi with a panoramic view of Medellin. It also has sophisticated security systems, not to prevent Pablo from escaping, but to protect him from his enemies. It is the most luxurious prison in the world, designed by and for the most powerful prisoner in history. Inside La Catedral, Pablo lives like an emperor. His days include business meetings, parties with prostitutes, soccer games with famous guests, and banquets prepared by chefs hired specifically for him. He receives visits from politicians, businessmen, journalists, and artists. He manages his criminal businesses using satellite phones and state-of-the-art computers. Officially, he is a prisoner serving a sentence. In reality, he is a king living in a palace built with cocaine money. From his luxurious prison cell, Pablo continues to coordinate drug trafficking operations. His lieutenants regularly visit La Catedral to receive orders, report profits, and request authorization for specific operations. Pablo has turned the prison into the command center of his criminal empire. The guards, all bribed, turn a blind eye when trucks arrive at night loaded with cash. In his first year in prison, Pablo earns more than $100 million. Inside La Catedral, Pablo establishes his own court of justice. When he discovers that some of his associates have been stealing from him or betraying him, he invites them to the prison to clear up misunderstandings. Several of these guests never make it out alive. The Galeano and Moncada brothers, Pablo's longtime associates, are tortured and executed inside the prison after being accused of stealing money from the organization. Pablo has turned his cell into a torture chamber where he himself is the judge, jury, and executioner. The United States watches in disbelief as Pablo lives luxuriously in his private prison while continuing his criminal operations. The DEA presents evidence to the Colombian government that drug trafficking from La Catedral has increased rather than decreased. Diplomatic pressure intensifies. The United States threatens to suspend financial aid if Colombia does not transfer Pablo to a real prison. The Gaviria government understands that the charade must end, but fears the consequences of confronting Pablo again. To maintain the security of La Catedral, Pablo recruits a group of young hitmen known as Los Pena Boys, led by John Jairo Velasquez, alias Popeye. These men live within the prison and act as Pablo's personal bodyguards. They are armed to the teeth and have orders to kill anyone who poses a threat. The presence of these hitmen turns La Catedral into an impenetrable fortress, but also into a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. In July 1992, the government decides to transfer Pablo to a real prison in Bogotá. The operation is secret, but Pablo learns about it through his government contacts. He understands that if he is transferred, he will lose all the power he has held from the cathedral. That night, Pablo makes a decision that would change the course of the war. He prefers to escape and return to hiding rather than live as a real prisoner. On July 22, 1992, as government troops surround La Catedral to transfer Pablo, They discover that the world's most famous prisoner has disappeared. Pablo escaped using secret tunnels he had built during the prison's construction. The escape is a national humiliation. The government had allowed the country's most dangerous criminal to build his own prison, live like a king for 13 months, and finally escape whenever he wanted. The war is about to restart, but this time it will be different. Pablo Escobar walks through the mountains of Antioquia in the early hours of July 23, 1992. After 13 months of luxurious living in La Catedral, he is once again a fugitive. But he is no longer the same man who voluntarily surrendered. He has lost the trust of the government, the patience of people, and the respect of many of his associates. His escape marks the beginning of the final phase of his life, an unprecedented manhunt that will involve two governments, elite special forces, and a group of avengers determined to collect all outstanding debts. Pablo has played his last card, and now he must face the consequences of 18 years of violence and unbridled power. Episode 7, The Hunt, the last 18 months of the patron saint, 1992 to 1993. The 18 months that followed Pablo Escobar's escape from La Catedral were the most intense in the history of organized crime. More than 3,000 Colombian, American, and British agents participated in his search. A death squad called Los Peeps murdered 300 of his collaborators. Pablo lost his adopted son, his best friends, and saw his empire crumble piece by piece. In the end, the man who once controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade would die fleeing across the rooftops of Medellin like a cornered mouse. But how did the most powerful criminal in history get to this point? Pablo Escobar's final months are a lesson in how absolute power inevitably leads to absolute destruction. After escaping from La Catedral in July 1992, Pablo Escobar discovers that the world has changed during his imprisonment. His former associates have formed alliances with other cartels, their routes have been dismantled, their properties confiscated, and many of his hitmen are dead or imprisoned. He is no longer the king of an empire. He is a fugitive with a $10 million bounty on his head. Pablo realizes he must rebuild his organization from the ground up, but this time with limited resources and enemies everywhere. The Colombian government creates the Search Block, an elite force of 600 men specifically trained to capture Pablo Escobar. The group is commanded by Colonel Hugo Martinez, an incorruptible officer who has rejected multiple bribe offers from Pablo. The block receives support from the United States, wiretapping equipment, reconnaissance aircraft, and advisors from the DEA and the CIA. For the first time in his criminal career, Pablo faces a police force he cannot buy, intimidate, or infiltrate. In January 1993, a paramilitary group called Los Peeps, persecuted by Pablo Escobar, emerged. It was made up of victims of Pablo's violence, relatives of murdered police officers, betrayed business partners, eliminated competitors. Their objective is simple: to destroy everything Pablo holds dear. Los Peeps aren't seeking to capture him. They want total revenge. They begin by murdering Pablo's lawyers, accountants, family members, and collaborators. Their message is clear: whoever helps the boss will die. In February 1993, Los Peeps murdered Brences Munoz, one of Pablo's most loyal hitmen, and practically an adopted son to him. Brences was tortured for hours before being executed. His death represented an emotional turning point for Pablo. For the first time in his life, the pain of loss overcame his thirst for revenge. Pablo realized that he was no longer fighting only for power or money. He was fighting to survive and protect the few people he still cared about. The Search Block uses cutting-edge technology to track Pablo. Telephone triangulation systems that can locate calls in real-time, night vision cameras, and directional microphones capable of picking up conversations from miles away. Pablo, who for years maintained a technological advantage over the authorities, now faces resources beyond his capabilities. He must change hiding places every few hours, limit his communications, and live like a hunted animal. In March 1993, Pablo makes the most painful decision of his life. He sends his wife Maria Victoria and his children Juan Pablo and Manuela abroad for their protection. The separation is devastating. Pablo embraces his family, knowing it is likely the last time he will see them. His children cry. His wife begs him to be with them, but Pablo understands that his presence puts them in mortal danger. That night, alone in a humid cove, Pablo Escobar cries for the first time in decades. In April 1993, Pablo discovers that several of his closest associates are secretly negotiating with the government to hand him over in exchange for legal benefits. The Ochoa brothers, former founders of the Medellin cartel, have decided that Pablo has become too much of a liability. This betrayal hits Pablo harder than any police operation. For 15 years, he blindly trusted these men, and now he discovers they are willing to sell him out to save their own lives. By October 1993, Pablo is virtually cornered in a few blocks of Medellin. The search block has identified his main hideouts. Los Peeps have eliminated most of his support network, and his few remaining hitmen are terrified of approaching him. Pablo lives by changing hiding places every night, communicating only with 3 trusted people, eating once a day, and sleeping 2 hours a night. The man who once had 300 homes now doesn't have a single one where he can feel safe. In November 1993, Pablo maintains desperate telephone conversations with his family, who are refugees in Argentina, but facing immigration problems. His children beg him to surrender, to accept extradition, to prefer being alive in a U.S. prison to dying as a fugitive in Colombia. Pablo promises them he'll find a solution, that they'll soon be together again, but in his heart he knows he's lying. There's no way out. He only has to choose how to die. On December 1st, 1993, Pablo makes a mistake that will seal his fate. Desperate to communicate with his son Juan Pablo, he makes a phone call that lasts 17 minutes. It's enough time for the search block's triangulation teams to pinpoint his exact position in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. Pablo ends the call, unaware that he's just signed his death warrant. The next day, 300 officers will surround the house where he is hiding, and the most intense manhunt in the history of crime will come to an end. It's the early morning of December 2nd, 1993, and Pablo Escobar can't sleep in a modest house in the Los Olivos neighborhood. Outside, unbeknownst to him, 300 armed men are positioning themselves for the final operation. In a few hours, the man who was once the 7th richest man in the world, who defied 2 governments, who built a $50 billion empire, will face his last day. 44 years after being born into poverty in Rio Negro, Pablo Escobar is about to die as he lived his final years, on the run alone and surrounded by enemies. The legend of the patron saint of evil will come to an end in a few hours, but his legacy of violence and power will forever change the face of Colombia and the world. Episode 8. The End of the Pattern, The Death of a Legend and the Birth of Myth, December 2nd, 1993. At 3:15 p.m. on December 2nd, 1993, Pablo Escobar lay dead on a red-tiled rooftop in Medellin, shot 3 times. He had lived 44 years, built the most powerful criminal empire in history, and challenged entire nations. His death marked the end of an era, but also the birth of a legend that endures to this day. What were the final hours of the world's most wanted man like? Did he die fighting like a warrior or fleeing like a coward? Was he executed by the police, or did he commit suicide to avoid capture? This is the story of Pablo Escobar's last 24 hours, the day the king of cocaine became history. Pablo Escobar wakes up at 6 in the morning on December 2nd, 1993, in a modest house in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. He is accompanied by only 2 men, Alvaro de Jesus Agudelo, alias El Limon, his most loyal bodyguard, and his cousin and best friend, Gustavo Gaviria. The house belongs to a family that Pablo bribed with $50,000 to hide. The once powerful drug trafficker looks gaunt. He has lost 20 kilos in recent months and has the look of a cornered animal that knows its days are numbered. At 10 in the morning, Pablo can no longer resist the anxiety of communicating with his family. His son Juan Pablo turned 16 3 days earlier, and Pablo couldn't congratulate him. Despite his bodyguard's warnings about the risks of communication, Pablo dials his family's number in Buenos Aires. The conversation lasts 17 endless minutes, during which Pablo tells his son that he loves him, that he'll find a way to reunite with them, that everything will be all right. These are the last words he will exchange with his family, and in his heart, he senses it as a farewell. While Pablo speaks with his family in the search block building, American DEA technicians watch with pinpoint precision how their triangulation equipment identifies a phone signal. The sophisticated tracking systems, donated by the U.S. government, can pinpoint any call lasting more than 3 minutes. After 17 minutes, they have the exact location: a 2-story house on 79th Street and 7th Avenue in the Los Olivos neighborhood. Colonel Hugo Martinez smiles for the first time in months. After 500 days of fruitless searching, they finally have Pablo Escobar. In less than an hour, the search block mobilizes 300 men toward Los Olivos. The operation includes snipers in surrounding buildings, assault teams with bulletproof vests, ambulances, support helicopters, and even a light tank. Every block around the target house is cordoned off. The agents receive specific orders. Pablo Escobar must be captured alive if possible, but if he offers armed resistance, the use of lethal force is authorized. After 5 years of war, no one wants to take unnecessary risks. While the agents take up positions, Pablo has a quiet lunch with El Limon and his cousin Gustavo. They eat sancocho, Pablo's favorite dish since childhood, prepared by the owner of the house who hides them. During the meal, Pablo talks about his plans to reunite with his family, to buy an island in the Caribbean, and to retire permanently from drug trafficking. His companions listen in silence. Both know they are the fantasies of a desperate man, but they don't have a heart to contradict him. It is Pablo Escobar's last meal, and he consumes it talking about a future that will never arrive. At 2:10 p.m., a neighborhood kid on Pablo's payroll runs up to the house shouting that the police are surrounding every block. Pablo looks out the window and confirms the worst. There are snipers on the rooftops, officers on every corner, helicopters hovering overhead. For a moment that seems eternal, Pablo remains motionless, processing that after 500 days on a run, they finally found him. Then, with the calm that always characterized him in moments of crisis, he says to his companions, "Guys, the time has come. Let's get our weapons ready." Pablo, El Limon, and Gustavo try to escape through the back of the house. They carry 9mm pistols and fragmentation grenades. Their plan is to reach the roof, jump to neighboring houses, and lose themselves in the urban labyrinth of Los Olivos. But when they climb the red tile roof, they discover they are completely surrounded. Snipers focus on them with telescopic sights. Helicopters shout at them through loudspeakers to surrender, and search block agents await them at every possible escape route. Pablo realizes there is no way out. After 25 years of flouting the law, he is finally trapped. At 3:05 p.m., the final shootout begins. Pablo and his companions fire from the roof at the agents trying to storm a house. Bullets whiz in all directions, breaking tiles, piercing walls, and shattering windows. The exchange of gunfire lasts barely 10 minutes, but it seems like an eternity. Pablo moves nimbly across the roof, firing accurately despite being outnumbered. It is a final act of bravery from a man who lived his entire life defying the odds. At 3:15 p.m., a shot hits Pablo Escobar in the right leg, knocking him to the rooftops. As he tries to get up, 2 more shots hit his torso and head. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, the man who controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade, amassed a fortune of $30 billion, defied 2 governments, and put an entire nation in jeopardy, dies on a red tile roof in the neighborhood where he grew up. He is 44 years, 1 month, and 1 day old. The war is over. The search block agents cautiously approach Pablo Escobar's body. Colonel Hugo Martinez confirms his identity and declares over the radio, "May he rest in peace." The first photographs of his body spread around the world within hours. In Medellin, some working-class neighborhoods declare mourning while others celebrate in the streets. In Bogotá, President Cesar Gaviria appears on national television to announce that Colombia has defeated terrorism. In Washington, the DEA celebrates the successful completion of the most expensive operation in its history. Pablo Escobar is dead, but his legend is just beginning. In the days following his death, thousands of people filed past Pablo Escobar's coffin in Medellin's La Macarena cemetery. For many residents of the shanty towns, Pablo was not a criminal, but a benefactor who built houses, schools, and soccer fields when the state had abandoned them. His grave became a place of pilgrimage, where the poor came to beg him for favors as if he were a saint. The paradox of Pablo Escobar persists even after his death. Simultaneously, the most ruthless criminal and the most generous benefactor in the history of Colombia. 30 years after his death, The name Pablo Escobar remains synonymous with absolute power and boundless ambition. His story has inspired dozens of books, films, television series, and documentaries. Tourists from around the world visit Medellin to learn about the places where the Lord of Evil lived. His image appears on T-shirts, his story is taught at universities, and his legacy is debated at academic conferences. Pablo Escobar achieved in death what he sought in life: immortality. His name will never be forgotten, although the reasons for remembering him will forever divide opinions. On December 2nd, 1993, the story of Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria ended, but the legend of the man who proved that in the 20th century, an intelligent and ambitious criminal could amass more power than presidents and kings began. His life was a roller coaster of dizzying rises and brutal falls, of unimaginable wealth and absolute loneliness, of familial love and implacable hatred. Pablo forever changed the rules of organized crime, transformed the face of Colombia, and proved that in the world of cocaine, power corrupts, but absolute power absolutely destroys. 44 years of life were enough for a poor boy from Rio Negro to become the most powerful criminal in history, and also for that same ambition to lead him to die alone, hunted and hated by half the world. This is a complete story of Pablo Escobar, the king who never wore a crown, the emperor who died a fugitive, the myth born from the harshest reality of Latin America.